Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I am reviewing Fruits Basket. Now, before I watched this, I had heard a lot of things about Fruits Basket. I had heard that it is a classic, both its anime and manga, and I had heard that it was a gateway drug for a lot of people when they were getting into anime. This kind of helped introduce them to what anime could be, and etc., etc. So, I had pretty good expectations when going into this. So, what's the story? The story of Fruits Basket is that we're introduced to our lead character, Toru Honda. Toru's mother has just died recently, and she is now living with her grandfather, but the house is getting renovated in order to take in some more relatives, so she has to go somewhere else, and she decides to live in a tent in the middle of nowhere. Now, on one day, when she's going to school, she comes across this traditional Japanese house. And in this house, there are two guys living there. There is a guy called Shigure, and there is a guy called Yuki. Now, Yuki, this guy here, she actually knows quite well. Yuki attends the same school, and he's absolutely, chased around by all the women. The women are like absolutely insane for Yuki. So, he's very well loved. And through a series of events, Toru ends up actually living with Yuki and Shigure, basically taking on the job of a maid. She's to clean the house, she's to cook their meals, etc., etc., and in return, she gets to live there. Now, we are also introduced to another character called Kyo, and Kyo is quite aggressive. He gets into conflict with Yuki quite frequently. But before the first incident can go too far, Toru discovers the family secret. And the family secret is that whenever one of the people from the Soma family get hugged by a person of the opposite gender, or they are under extreme stress, they turn into one of the Chinese zodiacs. So, a lot of awkward situations there, as you can imagine. Toru being a girl living in a house with three guys, with which if she manages to embrace them, even accidentally, they'll transform into an animal for a time period, and also when they transform back, they'll be completely naked. So that's kind of the plot. And what did I think of the plot overall? The plot itself, I really want to analyze this. There's kind of two sections to this plot. There's the episodic component, and the episodic component is usually quite comedic and enjoyable. Basically, we are introduced to characters from the rest of the family who also happen to be Chinese zodiac. So we get to see how they transform every time Toru awkwardly embraces them. It's always interesting how Toru always seems to find some way to hug them accidentally. But there's also a lot of drama involved. The characters are actually quite traumatized by a lot of things to do with being in the family and being turned into a animal every time someone of the opposite gender hugs them, etc., etc. So there's a lot of good drama, and there's a lot of great comedic moments from there. And in fact, one of my favorite character, without doubt, actually, I'd say would be Ayame. Ayame is one of the Chinese zodiac. I won't say which one he is, but he's an absolute scene stealer. I was roaring laughing at he's the kind of main character for 2 episodes, so I really enjoyed those episodes. And then we kind of have the serialized story, and what the kind of overarching story is that there is a character called Akito, and Akito is kind of the head of the family, and Akito is violent. He's very traditional, he's abusive, and he doesn't like, people finding out about the family secret and all that. And the story itself isn't bad. It's a bit slow paced. We're not really sure where everything's going for a long period of time. But the problem I had with the main story is the ending. And that is the last 2 episodes, well, I guess technically 3, although this flaw doesn't really appear until the last 2 episodes. The last 2 episodes are very, very serious, in complete contrast to the rest of the series. So, Nothing wrong with that, I guess, because Oran High School Host Club also, had that the last 2 episodes were like a lot more serious than the previous episodes. But whereas Oran High School Host Club managed to, present it charmingly, etc., etc., Fruits Basket's ending is very dark and unenjoyable, I would argue. Particularly since some characters actually seem to be quite out of character in it. I don't want to go too far into it, of course, because it's spoiler territory, but I will say I was quite disappointed at the ending. And I'm not sure if it was an anime original ending. I don't know. I haven't read the manga, so I would like to read the manga because, it's a classic, but it's out of print. Anyway, we're not talking about the manga, we're talking about the anime. So, characters. I guess I've already touched on the characters a bit. Let's just start off with Toru Honda. So Toru Honda is a bit of a stereotypical kind of shoujo lead character. She's cute, she's bubbly, quite independent, but she's also very trusting, and she doesn't really know how to speak up for herself, which I guess is a bit contradictory there, but that's how she is. And overall she is an enjoyable character, not particularly original, but she is charming. Now, Kyo and Yuki, their characters aren't inherently bad, but they suffer from what I would love to like. This came out way before Fairy Tail, but I'll call this now the Natsu Grey syndrome, and that is lead male characters seem to have to fight each other because of their macho-ness or something. So it's something that we've seen in a lot of other series, but here. I didn't really understand why there was such a great conflict between Yuki and Kyo. Now, of course, they explain that, okay, he's the cat and he's the rat. And, of course, that is supposed to be conflict. But, seriously, though, there is a feeling that there's a lot more kind of personality in the backgrounds, but we're never really given that proper explanation. Something that should have been explained very quickly, I'd say. So, I did find that quite irritating. Characters themselves, though, Yuki is actually quite charming. We see him grow over the course of the series. He becomes a lot more, kind of more social, more emotional as the series progresses. And he does end up becoming quite a nice character. I appreciate him. Kyo doesn't really see as much character development. But where he is, he's good. He has a great time talking to Toru, and, there is some, decent character development between them. But very much, I'd say the main focus on the series overall would be Toru and Yuki, with Kyo kind of left a bit back. So, and besides that, the other characters are all, they all have their charms. As I said before, Ayame is a real standout. He was absolutely hilarious. There's some other great characters as well. So a charming cast, that's what I'd say. Animation-wise, this was animated by Studio Dean. Now, Studio Dean, I'm not overly, familiar with their work. I mean, I know that they've animated Vampire Knight, I know they've animated Higurashi, but I haven't seen either of those. I'm reading those, but I haven't seen them. So I can't really compare the animation to those. But Fruits Basket, what I have to say about its animation is that its animation seems quite cheap in comparison to other anime series, but it's well directed, as in it hides very well the fact that it is cheaply made, and actually it lends it a lot of charm. So, the way characters kind of slide back and forth, or characters are kind of, doing the same thing over again for a little while. It's a very charming series from that, and I must commend the director for his skill at this. So, very charming animation. And the art style, which I'm assuming is very loyal to the manga, is very pleasant as well. Clean, crisp. The lead character's eyes actually remind me a lot of Rina Tanimura's. Her eyes are absolutely gigantic. But overall, it's a very pleasant looking series. Musically, it serves its purpose. There's some very nice pieces. The opening's quite charming. It's a bit slow. I've heard people criticize the opening, and I can kind of understand where they're coming from on that, but I did enjoy the opening. The ending was also good. And there's some very good pieces of music. One thing I really hate in a lot of series is the way that, awkward romance moments are handled, musically. But actually, it was handled very well in this, so overall, musically, it was very charming. The voice acting, I watched this in English. This is an older dub. I think this was dubbed by Funimation in the early 2000s. So it's a bit rough around the edges, like Shigure should actually be Shigure, I think, but you know, they just pronounce it Shigure and that's fine. But the actual acting itself is very good. Laura Bailey voices the lead character, and she brings her usual charm to it. Eric Vale, you know, who voices Sanji in One Piece, voices Yuki. He manages to bring a lot more emotion to his character than one would expect, because the character does start out quite emotionless. Jerry Jewell then voices Kyo, and he serves his purpose very well. You know, he's loud, he's kind of aggressive, he serves all the purposes. And I know I keep touching on Ayame too much, but I was so shocked when I found out that Ayame was voiced by Christopher R. Sabat, as in Zoro from One Piece, or Piccolo or Vegeta from Dragon Ball. He is unrecognizable as Ayame, and yet he is fantastic. So yeah, I know I keep going on about Ayame and I shouldn't, but I really did enjoy Ayame. Great cast overall. As I said before, it's an older dub, it's a bit rough around the edges, you know, some of the pronunciations aren't quite correct, but overall it's a very charming dub and it works very well for this series. So overall, what do I think of this series? It's recommendable. I recommend it. It's a very good series. There's a lot of charming comedy in it. There's a lot of interesting drama. There's some great characters. But as I said before, my biggest issue with this series is its ending, which I found quite unenjoyable and, you know, awkward, because, as I said before, some characters seem to act a bit out of character in that ending, so I found that awkward. But I still do recommend it. It's a very good series. 26 episodes. Actually, I'm going to point out the MVM edition of this has some special features. It has a behind-the-scenes featurette. Now I watched this, and the behind-the-scenes featurette is actually this kind of pre-release promotional video. So it's kind of the cast and the director, you know, saying how this series will be great, and you know, showing some of the behind-the-scenes thing. It's very much promotional and not quite analytical, but it's still very nice to see. There's some character profiles, text to songs. Akitaru Daichi interview. He's the director, which I didn't actually watch. I should do that, because as I said, I actually found his direction one of the good things about this series. Fruits Basket Room, which is the lead voice actors for the Japanese dub, you know, interviewing the other Japanese cast members in the series. And then you have some galleries. So actually a decent array of extras on this. So the MVM release is pretty good. So overall, I do recommend Fruits Basket. That's my review. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.